So look, we might kick things off. Thanks everyone for your time. Today we've got Gavin Coote, who's the Managing Director of Hydrix, presenting today. Hydrix is a company that I think everyone on the line should be familiar with, given we raised capital for the company only recently. More importantly was the news yesterday that AngelMed had been granted FDA approval. And obviously Hydrix has the APAC rights for that particular product. So it's a very important milestone for the company. So Gavin's kindly agreed to give us a presentation today to run us through it. So thanks for your time, Gavin. Take it away.
Cheers, thanks, Darren. Yeah, what's the storyline and why are we here today to update everybody? And I guess the key positioning of the company is as a med tech with a focus in cardiac products. That's the focus of the business at a group level. On the back of the FDA approval, that's been the key catalyst since we entered into the rights discussion back in AngelMed, actually back in October 2019. So it is absolutely the most significant milestone since we signed the distribution agreement. And why is that so? Well, it now enables us to go and start to do our regulatory submissions here in Australia with the TGA, and then also with Singapore's HSA. You'll recall that in August last year, we were able to work with Dr. Lam there in Singapore and get 7 sales and implants commenced in August last year. So that was the first in world implants of the device that the FDA has just approved, which is with that longer life battery. In the US, they're set up to begin commercial sales, which is also a critical milestone for them. And they'll start to kick those off in the coming weeks. I understand they've got around 65 plus implants lined up ready to go there. Now, a large portion of those are to re-implant those people that were involved in the clinical trials. Nonetheless, this is obviously very significant for them as well. So we're poised for growth simply because based on some indicative timelines with the regulatory approvals in Australia and Singapore, and what we can also get done in New Zealand, it sets us up to be potentially starting or commencing commercial sales early calendar year 2022. But certainly we'd expect things to be up and happening there in the June quarter next year, but it's quite possible they could kick off in that March quarter. And that's that cardiac focus, why it's important. It is the leading cause of death globally at about 31% of the population, and cardiovascular disease afflicts 14% of the global population. So it's a large addressable market. It's been compounded in recent years by the increase of diabetes and obesity, and the number of people therefore having heart attacks, which is what the AngelMed device is designed to help manage that patient, comorbidity situation. And it's a world first. There is no other implantable heart attack alert device anywhere in the world. So we don't have any competitors today to this device as we go to market. The other aspects in terms of adoption rates, the implant procedure is basically identical to a pacemaker implant. Pacemakers have been implanted for close on 6 decades. Today it takes less than an hour to complete the procedure. And so we're not changing anything there. Instead of, once the electrophysiologist implants the pacing lead into the heart, instead of putting a pacemaker on it, they're going to put this AngelMed device. Just for making sure we're all clear, the AngelMed device is designed to address the plumbing problems that a patient has, which is distinctly different to a pacemaker, which is designed to deal with a patient's electrical circuitry of the heart. You can't have both. And the incidence of plumbing problems is larger than the number of people that have electrical problems with their heart, generally speaking. So the market size is really quite strong. The purpose of the chart on the right-hand side is there's a lot of market interest in what's happening with the AngelMed device. The Singapore implants last year, it triggered an emphatic response. We were able to work with Bell Potter raising capital in October last year, which was highly successful, and we're able to deleverage the balance sheet, paying off over $4.5 million of debt. So it certainly strengthened the balance sheet and gave us the funding to continue to build out the sales and marketing and distribution and regulatory stuff for the Hydrix medical part of the business. So and then with the FDA approval, been a lot of activity since Monday making that announcement. Just a real quick refresher. So what's the market size opportunity with the AngelMed Guardian? There's about 500,000 plus people annually having an acute coronary syndrome event across the 8 countries that we can distribute exclusively the AngelMed device. We anticipate pricing around about $10,000 in Australia. That's what we've sold the devices for in Singapore under the special access schemes. And it's also the predicate pricing in the US is around about $8,000 US. So if you think about it, that's the support around that pricing. Our distribution model is to go direct in Australia, New Zealand and Singapore at that rate, which will attract very strong gross margins. In the other markets, so Hong Kong, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand and Japan, we will work through sub-distributors. Obviously, we're not looking to build sales infrastructure in those markets. We are in dialogue with different potential sub-distributors in the Southeast Asia markets. They've all currently distributing cardiac devices, so they're familiar. They've got cardiologists, hospitals, they understand reimbursements and regulatory environments in those countries. It's the fastest way for us to get to market. It's also, we think, the most cost-effective way to move to market. And there's enough in the pricing of the product at those sort of retail prices adjusted for sub-distributors and what we're paying for the device to generate good gross margins at the end of the day. We anticipate that it'd be sort of around usual sort of commercial rates, around about 40% gross margins on a blended basis. So if we were to capture 3% of those 500,000 patients per year having some sort of heart attack event or an unstable angina event, that would enable us to sell about 15,000 units a year, and at a blended average revenue, it'd be about $100 million of revenue a year. So the market, without having to capture a large share, the market opportunity, is obviously pretty compelling from anyone's perspective there, particularly for an ASX listed medtech products-based company. While we don't own the IP, what I would sort of respectfully submit is the fact that our distribution agreement is exclusive. There is no other competitive product out there in the market. The product is very well protected from a patent perspective. We essentially have an agreement to distribute through, call it 2030. And so for all intents and purposes, there's less relevance on whether or not we own the IP or we're just a third-party distributor here. Other ways that we're capturing value with AngelMed is that we're also working with them on some next generation feature function attribute sets. And we've also got an investment in them that we invested $1 million, a mix in cash and equity. They're getting set up for a Series B round later this year. And they're mapping around potential NASDAQ listing and or really large trade exit. They're a listing maybe around about $500 million US and potential to trade $1 to $2 billion in 3 to 5 years. So they're numbers that are being worked on with their own comparable analysis modeling, and that would see a 10x plus return on our $1 million investment in US terms. So we've got lots of ways we can capture value here and lots of ways that we can participate in the global success of what AngelMed's going to do. So it is a beachhead and a cornerstone piece. What other benefits does it bring aside from a standalone proposition? If you think about the fission opportunity, which is a surgical tool, it's a single-use surgical tool for a patient that has a blockage and needs a stent put in. This tool is going to be used to assist the interventional cardiologist doing that work. That's a US-based company. They see as what we're doing with AngelMed, relationships with our team and them from past dealings over the previous 2 or 3 decades, it really creates an opportunity for those US-centric companies looking to pursue an Asia-Pac distribution strategy, don't know how to do it, or they want to focus on primarily their efforts in the US. We think that it creates the potential for high quality inbound deal flow and interest around being able to find other cardiac devices and important medtech devices for distribution in the market. And typically, because we have the Hydrix services business, powerful product innovation capability, 15 to 20 years of taking client products from concept to commercialization. AngelMed's a great example of what we can do for other clients. So there becomes this reinforcing flywheel, and that's how the value proposition sticks together. And as we see this high quality, high potential inbound deal flow, if we're going to be involved in it from a services perspective, we'll also consider whether or not it makes sense to take a minority interest in that business as well. So you can start to see that as a medtech positioned product company with a focus in cardiac today, and how we can leverage ventures to align some interest and capture more of the value we create. But also in services, if you think about it, if the storyline is as a medtech company, then if you look at Abbott, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, or Biotronic, those companies have an R&D business in-house. They also have ventures. The purpose of the R&D is it might be 5, 10, or 15% of their revenues. In our case, our engineering wage bills sort of circa around about $10+ million. Well, if R&D is 10% of your revenues, in our case, our R&D business would actually support a $100 million medtech product business. And all of those other large US competitors that do ventures, they do it to get on the ground with emerging technologies that they can help strategically build them to market with a view of potentially acquiring them downstream or getting access to distribution rights. So you can see how the model all comes together. And I think the storyline as a medtech, primarily medtech products company with a focus in cardiac, it starts to explain how the corporate strategy of the 3 different platforms all hang together. We do have non-medtech clients in Hydrix services, in industrial mining and some defence. There's other benefits that brings to the business around capability set, the ability to scale that know-how and capability more broadly and solve novel problems in a different way than a pure medtech company might do it from their internal R&D house. So that's our focus today. I think there is some opportunities because of what we do get to work on in the Hydrix services, that in the future, if it made sense and it's compelling and the medical part of the business is going really well, it does enable us to get optionality over setting up other business segments on the back of a success like a Hydrix Medical, could be in industrial applications or not. It's not the heavy focus today, but that power of what the Hydrix group can deliver, it means, for the next, 12 months and the next decade, we can continue to build a really compelling ASX-listed technology company, and today one that is more reflective of a health tech play. So what's important as we look ahead in the first half of fiscal 2022 and the second half of 2022 around indicative milestone timelines and potential news flow? And this is about us trying to create a transparent platform of what we are working on internally. Clearly, as we've seen in the last 12, 15 months, whether it be the Singapore implants that were scheduled for March last year and got disrupted with COVID, they got done in August and we delivered on what we set out to do. It's the same here in Australia. There's been COVID interruptions, both in the medical, and it's had some impact on some of the client services work, particularly around the medtech clients, etc. We'll get these things done. I think we're well placed to be confident that these things can happen. These are timelines that we would like to be able to work towards. The submission of TGA application for AngelMed and with HSA in Singapore, those things have kicked off. We've already started a couple of the initial submission applications with the TGA on the back of the FDA approval. We are still working towards sponsored implants of the AngelMed device here in Australia, as we've done in Singapore. We're looking outside of Melbourne. It's certainly been heavily impacted by embargoes on hospitals, and it's an elective surgery, so we can't progress it. So that'll happen here at some stage. The Fission first in human trials, waiting on product to be delivered by Fission. Anticipate that's going to happen early to midway through the September quarter. Everything else is set up in terms of the hospital we're doing at it, the administration, the program, all that sort of stuff. So that'll be another important piece of news there. We're progressing conversations, as I said, with sub-distributors for AngelMed, particularly in the Southeast Asia area. People that are qualified and already distributing cardiac medtech devices there, and companies that our three senior executives have all dealt with in a previous life. So they're highly qualified. The Hydrix Ventures portfolio, just as a soundbite there, all three are looking at valuation inflection points at some stage this calendar year, either through raising capital or their own regulatory milestones being met. So we expect to come to the market with updated news on that. And we are continuing to evaluate other opportunities in the cardiac product space, either investments with services and or potential to own IP that is really strong and central to our cardiac theme. In terms of the second half, what we are looking at is 6 to 9 months regulatory approval, probably in the TGA. The predicate approval with the FDA is absolutely critical to being able to run a shortened timeline on that. So it could be 6 months, could be a little less, could be a little more. That's what we're just trying to work with right now. The reimbursement schemes, we've already been working on the MSAC application, which helps get an MBS code for the surgery to make sure the clinicians are getting reimbursed. We will, now that we've submitted our TGA application, we can start the PLAC, which is about getting the insurance companies signed up for a device reimbursement. Those programs are underway. Our 3 people that are senior execs in Hydrix, supported with our regulatory and clinical services team inside Hydrix Services. Plus, we've got an external subject matter expert who does this for clients all day long. So we've de-risked the regulatory approval and the healthcare reimbursement programs here in Australia with getting all of the right people around the table, and that's been worked on even leading up into today. It just means we can now really start to accelerate those processes there. So hopefully we get to commence commercial sales, if not in the March quarter. We'd certainly expect them to be happening in the June quarter. And with New Zealand, the process there isn't a TGA-like regulatory body there, so we can work off the FDA. So Vicky Edwards, who we brought in April, she's leveraging all of her cardiology network here in New Zealand. She's obviously pushing the ground up in Sydney. Paul Kelly, the GM, is pushing the ground here in Melbourne. We did have a booth at the Australia-New Zealand Cardiology Conference scheduled for the first week of August. Due to the COVID lockdowns overnight, that may now need to turn virtual, but it's a really good platform for us to create a scientific webinar, if you will, of what we're doing in Hydrix Medical around the AngelMed and the Fission devices. So just as we've done in Singapore last year and early parts of this year with scientific webinars, we are looking to do that here in Australia to build awareness. We do need to stay within the TGA guardrails. We can't go broad brush market, camp advertising in that, but we're able to have very specific clinical conversations. So we're doing some of that groundwork today as well. All of these sorts of activities set ourselves up well for a really good adoption as we get regulatory approval and reimbursement codes to come to the market here. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, as there has been. And so we think we've got a good plan in place that says we should be able to achieve some of these things. On the back of the Fission first in human trial, the the cardiologists that have looked at the sample devices are very impressed. We get through the first in human trials. They anticipate that they'll be able to start to bring those to market under authorised prescriber schemes until the regulatory approval is in place. It's a different process to the AngelMed, given that it's not an implantable device. It's a one-time use device used for surgical procedures. So, yeah, that too should be able to generate commercial sales in probably about a bit over 6 months' time. So, look, they're the key milestones. Why don't I pause and just see if there's any questions to clarify anything or answer something else I haven't covered.
Maybe just a quick one from me, Gavin. Been doing a bit more reading on some of Medtronic's products, especially in that cardiac rhythm space, and they're clearly a market leader. Are there any sort of collaborative or partnership opportunities that you could see with them? And given the structure of the business, how amenable are you to those sorts of agreements?
Yeah, that's a great question. So where we think we can go direct successfully, like in Australia and Singapore, it makes sense for us to do it because we can achieve it with a relatively low field engineer footprint and still get good sales volumes through. In those other markets, and Japan's a really interesting one, there are those large sorts of entities who it could make sense. In that case, particularly if we look at Japan, it may not be Medtronic, it may be another player. We would work to make sure that AngelMed was comfortable with who we appointed in that situation, because it also may be strategically of value to them based on their distribution model. Is they're evaluating where they may want to go direct in the US and or where they may want to actually partner up with a cornerstone strategic company. So it's something that's on their mind, and obviously we'd work together where that made sense if it was going to help us expand our revenue here. And I guess that you haven't asked the question, but it's a logical thing. Well, what would happen if AngelMed was acquired, for example, by one of those large companies in the next few years? Under the terms of the distribution agreement, we've got a buyout provision in there effectively that would generate royalty fees based on the sales that they would achieve after the fact if we were to obviously have to but have the distribution agreement acquired from us. So either way, whether we're going direct, working through distributors, or the proposition becomes so compelling that one of the large players wants to take AngelMed out, we've still got good protection under the distribution agreement. I do know that they've had conversations with all of the large players, plus another large one out of Europe. The large European player surveyed all of the emerging cardiac technologies. I think they identified 21 of them. They said, here are the 4 that we're most interested in. And at the top of their list is AngelMed as a device. The other 3 players were largely around data. So there's a lot of strategic thinking that's been had at the board level with the new CEO, Brad Snow, that's just taken over recently, Elise.
Great, thanks.
Any further questions for Gavin?
All right, look, so Darren, that's probably what I wanted to cover today. Is there anything else you'd want to touch base on around valuation, comparables, or anything like that you had some thoughts on?
Yeah, look, I guess the only thing from our side, Gavin, would be interested your view on valuation. I mean, it would appear that you're trading on somewhere in the order of 2 times revenue, which is, I guess, the peer group probably trades somewhere around 12 times revenue on a forward basis. So, why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, so there's the F20 and F21 revenue multiples to EV are somewhere between 15 and 20 times. So we're clearly not being valued at those sort of levels, and they're mainly medtech product companies. I think today the market's still sees Hydrix as a services company because of the legacy of how we've entered into building out the corporate platform or the corporate strategy. I think that's the important thing for us, is to get out and continue to say what we are is a medtech product company with a focus in cardiac, and it has distribution, it does R&D services for clients, and it also has an ventures investment arm. And I think if we can get that message and that positioning recalibrated, I think that'll help people see things more clearly. The second is the milestone of an FDA approval is significant because it brings the commercialization program forward, and it gives us a more clarity and certainty around being able to start to generate revenues. Third, I think it gives the board and the executive track record that we can do what we set out to do. Granted, the timelines can vary, but we do what we say we're going to do. We've got a clear strategy. So I think the more we can execute against what we're laying out as the key milestones here, I think that'll also build market confidence. And so look, they're probably the three big things, Darren, for people to keep in mind. Certainly, 33 million shares traded on Monday on the news. We saw the price peak at around 80 cents last year on the back of the Singapore implants. So a lot of people watching the stock. I would suggest at this stage, respectfully, that the upside is far greater and outweighs the downside risks based on the entry point around the valuation today. That's somewhere between 25 and 30 million, and even pre-revenue medtech product companies on the ASX that we've built products for wholeheartedly. They're valued at 50, 100, 150, 200 million dollars with less revenue, higher cash burn than what we're exhibiting, and our growth story on the product revenue side is as compelling as theirs as we're currently structured. So the sum of the parts here, the value of our ventures alone is probably within 3 years north of $15 million. $5 million just to be valued as a public company shell. And we've got a services business that's got a 15 to 20 year track record of, historically hitting, the pre-COVID years, revenues of, north of $15 million and, a profitable business. So I think, we're not getting value for all parts of the business today, but simplifying it, medtech, health tech play, cardiac focus, got a history of being able to, bring product innovation to market, and we'll get re-rated.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, it was a great opportunity for potential buyers there, Gavin. Well, thanks for your time today. Appreciate everyone else joining as well.
Cheers. Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Elise. And everyone stay safe and well.
Cheers.
Yeah.